Chapters 4 and 5, From a Twice-Dead Genius Comporting with Misunderstood Abominations, written and narrated by R. Gary Raham. Welcome to a reading focusing on aliens. Aliens of the extraterrestrial variety. My name is Gary Raham, the author of A Twice-Dead Genius Comporting with Misunderstood Abominations, a science fiction tale that takes place 875,000 years in the future, and populated by two species of aliens. If you're here, I'm assuming you enjoy weird aliens as much as I do. As a biologist by training, I think speculating about the nature of extraterrestrial life is a fun and challenging exercise. Besides, aliens can get away with saying lots of things about how silly we humans can be without getting in trouble for it. That can be both enlightening and funny. Some background information is in order. If the book as a whole is about a twice-dead genius, he must have died before. Sure enough, my previous book in this Dead Genius series was called A Once-Dead Genius in the Kennel of Master Mortigue Ambergrand. The dead genius in question is Rudy Goldstein, the inventor of the biomic network algorithm that saved 22nd century Earth from ecological meltdown. Unfortunately for Rudy, after he died a natural death, his brain was hijacked by an unscrupulous doctor, and Rudy's mind was placed under the custodianship of Namaznani, a.k.a. Nessie, a super-smart AI. Subsequently, an asteroid impact near the coast of Australia wiped out human civilization, although not all humans. Namaznani and Rudy survived the event in time to make first contact with aliens from the planet Jatterbad nearly 1 million years later. The section I will be reading today will be about a Jatterbadian named Master Veltipo Fragenrude and two of his students, a human named Tater and a young Jatterbadian named Maxifer. Tater and Maxifer are both interested in the study of Earth fossils, particularly local exposures of a Cretaceous, early dinosaur age, seaway. I mentioned ammonites in Chapter 4, which are fossilized mollusks similar to modern shelled mollusks with tentacles in the genus Nautilus, found in the deep Pacific Ocean today. To properly understand Jatterbadians, one needs to understand their biology. In this latest book in the series, I provide an illustrated diagram showing the life cycle of a typical Jatterbadian, along with a genealogy chart that shows how Tater and Maxifer relate to characters in the Once-Dead Genius book. Jatterbadians have an insect-style life cycle with a complete metamorphosis. Now channel your old high school biology class for a moment. Butterflies and moths, for example, demonstrate this transformation. An egg hatches into a worm-like larva that has several growth molts before transforming into a dormant pupal stage. New genes turn on within the pupa to ultimately create the unique adult sexual form of the creature, which is typically short-lived. Males and females mate to produce eggs to complete the cycle. In the case of Jatterbadians, females lay eggs in salt water, where they hatch and compete with each other ferociously for as long as a decade. The 10% who survive come ashore as tripod larval infants. Adults harvest infants and bring them into Jatterbadian society. Tripod larvae are aptly named because Jatterbadians have a mostly radial 3-part symmetry, 3 limbs per segment, 3 eyes, and 3 larval segments in mature adults. Jatterbadians live long as they attempt to prosper. Tripod infants, called firsties, grow for about 25 Terran years. Their basal segment elongates, and one basal limb modifies into a tail-like support limb. They typically have a molt in approximately 100 Terran years, after which they become a second instar. In another 100 years, they molt to become a mature third instar adult that go on to live into their 4th Terran century. Adult humans are about 1 Jatterbadian segment tall, so mature adults tower over humans. In the segment I will read, Tater is 22 years old, and his Jatterbadian companion Maxifer is just under 100 Terran years old, but a young adult by Jatterbadian standards. By chance, on Jatterbad, very human-like primates were considered adorable pets. So it was natural when Jatterbadians came through a stargate to find humans living in pre-technological tribes, they considered them adorable, but certainly not their intellectual equals. Rudy helped change some of their minds in the previous book in the series, but I'll let you discover the details about that yourselves. In the current book, some progressive Jatterbadians are attempting to live on more or less equal terms with humans, and some, like Master Veltipo, are even considering a kind of abominable union with humans. In Chapter 4, Master Veltipo's Lesson Plans, the reader meets Master Veltipo and his students for the first time. I hope you enjoy this introduction to Jatterbadian academia and aliens who smell and taste life a little differently than human beings. Chapter 4, Master Veltipo's Lesson Plans. This takes place in a Jatterbadian teaching academy near Jataman City. Master Veltipo Fragenrud turned the page and breathed deeply through his spiracles. Ah, the taste and smell of knowledge. Intoxicating. He could have looked up the relevant research and the digital archives, of course, but there was just something about the taste, feel, and flickering colors of a properly designed sensoramic book that made the nerves connecting his major ganglia shiver with anticipation. Using the middle finger on the hand of one lateral arm, he traced the passage he was looking for. Fascinating. These primitive worms lay eggs eaten by an isopod crustacean whose behavior is altered in a way that makes them more vulnerable to predation by their next host, a bird. I recall a similar parasite-host system in the Jatterbadian literature. I can use this in tomorrow's lesson plan. Oh my, what time is it? Veltipo glanced at the chronometer patch embedded in his third second-tier arm while simultaneously setting down his morning brew using the hand of his second arm and closing the book in front of him with the hand so recently engaged as a reading assist. I'll be late for class. Veltipo reached for his sensorama pad as he rose from the bench and steadied himself on his tripod of legs, all of them stiff from too much time in the exercise pod yesterday. Oh, for the second instar days of his youth again. Settle down, Veltipo, he told himself. You're the professor. Class isn't going to start without you. He briefly recalled a time during a human archaeology class with the late Master Mortigue as a young academic on Jatterbad. The professor had burst through the doorway a full half-cycle late and had forgotten to completely zip his middle circlet, exposing a pheromone gland. Female cuticles flickered in pink and violet. For several minutes, until he discovered his error, he had to turn on fans to clear the room of titillating odors. It didn't take Veltipo long to cross campus, although he would have preferred a more leisurely amble to fully appreciate the clear air and exotic fragrances of his adopted planet. Earth was a near wilderness compared to the crowded shores and urban centers of Jatterbad. It took a while to get used to the Earth's more intense sun and oddly blue sky, but it was home now. He felt pride in his accomplishment of building this academy near Jataman City, a place where both humans and Jatterbadians could exist as equals, and perhaps become something more than the sum of their individual species. When the door to his classroom irised open, and he ducked his third instar frame through the entrance, he saw pretty much what he had expected. Humans chattered among themselves, many perched at various locations on the latticework of beams with seating areas built in. Primates do like to climb. Part of their attraction to those who still consider the species to be nothing more than pets, I suppose. Jatterbadians had spread themselves over the benches designed for their comfort. Most were first molts just out of early school, but there were a few second-star molts who had missed his coursework during the earlier cycles. A few Jatterbadians and humans mingled in triads or pairs, including Tater and Maxifer, students for whom Veltipo had high hopes. "Assemble, students," said Master Veltipo in his most commanding voice. "We have a lot to cover today and not much time to do it." The lesson proceeded well. The pale-skinned human student named Vort did fiddle with the hair of a female he liked. Veltipo always struggled to remember her name. Vanglish? Yes, Vanglish. And a young Jatterbadian named Ilsant tried to flicker obscene shades of purple, streaked with orange, when he thought the professor wasn't looking. Other than that, most of the pupils dutifully made entries on their pads when they weren't focused on his presentation. Veltipo took pride in his master-teacher ratings. After the period chime sounded and lights flickered in shades of green to denote the end of the session, students began to collect their impedimenta and rise to depart. "Tater and Maxifer," said Veltipo, "please see me a moment before you leave." "Yes, master?" Maxifer asked, planting his tripod of feet as Tater brought up the rear. "I like that image of an ammonite on your circlet, First Molt," said Veltipo, waiting for Tater to get closer. "You and Tater must still be avidly at work studying the ancient seaway exposures southeast of Jataman City, I suppose." "Thank you, Master Veltipo." Maxifer glanced down at the ammonite graphic with one eye. "We most certainly are. In fact, we are—" Tater stumbled, bumping into Maxifer as he reached his side. "Oops, sorry, Max." He looked up at the professor. "You wanted to see us, sir? I have a class I need to get to, and it's clear over at the Academy Annex." "Just checking to see if you both have given any more consideration to entering the Sensitio program. Your genetic profiles would be a perfect match, and you, Tater, can trace your roots directly back to Twill, while Maxifer is a descendant of Master Mortigue Ambergrand. An added bonus there, with the historical context and all." "Oh, we're thinking about it." Maxifer's 3 arms stroked sensory pilly and tugged at his circlets as if he didn't quite know what to do with them. "It's a big step," Tater added. "My folks aren't all that keen about it, but I'm working on 'em, sir. We have a little time left to decide, right?" "Yes, there's some time yet." Veltipo arched over them and squirted pheromonic scents of encouragement, although sometimes those subtleties were lost on humans. "Don't wait until you reek with the stench of near-deadline anxiety." "Oh, I try to avoid reeking with stenches of all kinds, master." Tater pressed his lips together, one edge of his mouth threatening to angle upward. "Oh, we won't, master." Maxifer rolled one eye in Tater's direction. "Were you going to ask?" Maxifer began, before Tater interrupted. "Really gotta go. Later, Maxifer, I promise." To Master Veltipo, Tater said, "We will think on it, sir, promise. I'm going to be late if I don't get moving." With that comment, he turned and sprinted toward the door. Maxifer looked up at his professor, flickering in pale blue shades of appeasement. "You know how humans are, master." Oh, indeed, he knew how humans were. He also knew how students of all species were. Tater and Maxifer appeared to be up to something. Chapter 5, Playing Hooky. This takes place later that same evening. "Are you sure Master Veltipo approves of this, Tater?" Maxifer stood tall on his tripod of legs. As a first molt Jatterbadian, he was only a handful of centimeters taller than Tater, but 25% heftier. He released a chemical bouquet of cautionary pheromones. The scents probably had little effect on his human friend, so he crossed 2 manipulator tentacles and waved the third in Tater's direction, pointing his middle finger on the terminus of that appendage toward the transport. The sensory hairs on Maxifer's cuticle contracted when a draft of cool air swirled around the loading bay just outside Veltipo's academy walls. Tater smiled in that pursed lip, crooked way that Maxifer had come to know meant that Tater was concealing something from him. No worries, Maxifer. Master Veltipo is interested in the fossils we are finding, too. Who wouldn't be excited about ancient sea creatures captured in stone? Maybe we can write a paper about our discoveries in the Journal of Extra-Jadabadian Curiosities. I thought we were studying the elements of human-Jadabadian integrative mergers today, Maxifer countered. You know, Master Veltipo thinks we are a perfect match for symbiotic merger. Maxifer recalled some of the various experiments that allowed he and Tater to share each other's sensory milieu, as Master Veltipo was fond of saying. Maxifer had tried very hard not to be disgusted by the fluids that humans emitted from various orifices. He also felt claustrophobic, using the rather limited sensory input of humans, especially the paltry odor detection abilities and the limited EM bandwidth of their eyes. Maxifer imagined he could feel Master Veltipo's eyes focused on them at this very moment. He used one of his primary eyes to scan the row of windows along the upper floor that looked out on the loading bay. The windows remained dark beneath their cornices, like eyes brooding under heavy brows. Maxifer supposed their teacher could be observing them from one of those darkened rooms, but guessed that was unlikely. "Help me with these supplies, old worm." Tater hefted a box containing dehydrated meals and kitchen utensils and moved toward the storage compartment of the transport. "Anyway, you don't really want me attached to you like a parasite, do you? We should think carefully about being syncytiotes, don't you think?" Maxifer's dorsal posterior ganglion did kind of ache when he thought about it. Some of his friends thought Jadamen would be abominations. But what about the legendary Rudimort? He was a kind of syncytiote. Humans and Jadabadians both told stories about the great things that the ancient human spirit called Rudy and the Jadabadian Master Mortigue Ambergrand had learned while their minds were intertwined. Tater was a direct descendant of Twill, who traveled with the Rudy spirit, and Maxifer took pride in the fact that he was a surviving larvae of Master Mortigue's and Selea's spawn. Perhaps they were meant to become syncytiotes. Maxifer picked up a large bag with bedding and followed Tater. "I don't know, primate. It is a big commitment, with quite a few unknowns." "Exactly." Tater handed his box to the R-72 Spiderbot, who moved it into position in the hold. "Let's take a few days in the wilderness, work at the quarry, and take some time to think things through under the starry night sky." Tater looked up at what was left of this morning's night sky and gestured toward the rich belt of stars humans called the Milky Way. He turned to face Maxifer and winked at him. "What do you think?" Maxifer knew the human was playing him somehow, but Tater's unexpected adventures were part of the reason he liked him. Maxifer's own impulses were to study in the archives and stay out of trouble. It got him praise from Master Veltipo, but failed to make his dorsal hearts pound with excitement. "I'm in, primate, at least for 3 days." Maxifer looked at the transport carefully with all 3 primary eyes. "You're sure Master Veltipo approves?" His cuticle flickered in shades of cautionary amber. Tater smiled and made a gesture with the finger of one hand, as if he was recreating an image of the citadel over his heart. Maxifer knew that behavior was supposed to signify unfettered truth, but he had his doubts. "Let's finish packing before the sun comes up. It's a long drive to the Badlands, especially when R-72 is driving. He has too many safety protocols hardwired into his operating system." "Those protocols will ensure a safe journey." R-72 accepted Maxifer's bundle of bedding and moved it into position. "No editorializing, AI." Tater ignored the Spiderbot and arched his eyebrows at Maxifer. "All right, human. Let's do this before I change my mind." Maxifer could sympathize with the Jadabadians who made pets of humans. They were ridiculously cute and hard to deny. especially when they raise those furry patches above their eyes. Well, thanks for listening. A Twice Dead Genius Comporting with Misunderstood Abominations is available now at Amazon as both a print edition and Kindle ebook. I'd love to have your review. Through the end of this month, the novel is also available to review via NetGalley. I also hope you will visit my website at www.raham.com. It features both my books and illustrations. Feel free to sign up for a newsletter or check out my blog. This has been a reading of chapters 4 and 5 from A Twice Dead Genius Comporting with Misunderstood Abominations, available on Amazon for $15 in the print edition or $2.99 the Kindle edition. Thanks again for listening.